Finally tonight, as the U.S. wraps up Veterans Day parades and tributes, we would like to introduce you to a very brave and very faithful soldier. Captain Humbert Rocky Versace served in both the Korean War and in Vietnam, where he was captured and tortured for 2 years and ultimately killed. He was a devout Catholic with a dream of one day becoming a priest and working with orphans. In 2001, he became the only Army POW to ever receive the Congressional Medal of Honor. And joining us tonight with more on this story is Kevin Rue, Army Veteran and Spokesman for Friends of Rocky Versace. Kevin, welcome. Thank you so much for your time today. Let's talk more about Captain Versace. I know that he was the son of a soldier. He also served as an altar boy and eventually graduated from West Point, after which his first assignment was in Korea, where you say he used his free time in a somewhat curious way. What can you tell us?
Yes, this was in 1960 in war-torn Korea, a country that was just 7 years after the ceasefire in the Korean War, and the country was devastated. Tens of thousands of orphans, as you can well imagine. And Rocky, as a second lieutenant in charge of a tank platoon, had a great deal of responsibility. However, he found out that where he was based, there was a Catholic orphanage. And on Sundays, with the limited free time that he had, he worked with Catholic priests and the nuns who were there in that orphanage, helping out the orphans.
That is absolutely wonderful. I know later during his first tour in Vietnam, Rocky really started to ponder the priesthood, and he even got accepted into the seminary, but then he got sent back to Vietnam for a second deployment. What happened after that?
Correct. He finished a one-year combat tour in Vietnam from May of 1962 to May of 1963, then voluntarily extended his combat tour for 6 months. And during his time between those two tours, he came home to the United States and told his parents that he'd been accepted at the Maryknoll Seminary to become a Catholic priest after he finished his Army obligation. 2 weeks prior to his scheduled departure from Vietnam, originally scheduled in November now of 1963, he was on a combat operation with 2 other American soldiers and hundreds of South Vietnamese militia troops. Unfortunately, that combat operation went bad, and Rocky, First Lieutenant Nick Rowe, and Sergeant First Class Daniel Pitzer were captured by the Viet Cong.
Can you talk to us about the conditions, during his time as a prisoner? Kind of explain all that to us.
Certainly. This was a prisoner of war camp run by the Viet Cong, not the camps that many people are familiar with from the Vietnam War in Hanoi, run by the North Vietnamese. This was a jungle prisoner of war camp, and the conditions were very austere. First of all, it was in the far south of South Vietnam, further south than Saigon, and it was a place called the U Minh Forest, known by locals as the Forest of Darkness. It was triple canopy jungle. Thus, the prisoner of war camp didn't require any fences or really any guards, because if you were to escape, where would you go? The triple canopy jungle blocks out all the sunshine, so you were disoriented and wouldn't know north, south, east, or west. They also had very limited rations, no medical care, and they were tortured by the Viet Cong and subject to indoctrination by the communist cadre.
It's really hard to imagine which awful, awful conditions there. But I know that one of the things he used to do is that he actually used to sing from his isolation box, even up until his last days. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Rocky was the senior officer, and he took charge, and he did everything he could to make sure that he was increasing the morale of his fellow prisoners of war, Nick Rowe and Sergeant Dan Pitzer. As the senior officer in charge, he constantly was at the Viet Cong to tell them they should have better treatment, better food, better medical care, any medical care really. And he frequently sang patriotic songs and popular songs to buoy the morale of his fellow prisoners of war.
And before I let you go, what lessons do you think we can learn from him as we pay tribute to all of our veterans today?
Rocky gave his life, and he never thought that the United States would disregard him. He never lost his faith in God. That was it. He went to his death knowing that he would never deny his Catholic faith and that he would never lose faith in the United States of America. And that's what helped his fellow prisoners of war endure their own captivity. And both Nick Rowe, who escaped after 62 months as a prisoner of war, and Sergeant First Class Daniel Pitzer, who was released after 4 years as a prisoner of war, that allowed them to survive because Rocky took the brunt of the punishment and enabled his fellow prisoners of war to live.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us about this incredible man. We appreciate it, and thank you for your service, sir.